All right, so turning the page, we've got Mr. Arnold, his plea agreement, potential jail calls and social media, and the jail calls would again only be, y'all are having him testify, planning to.
Correct.
So that would be, is that gonna be anything other than potential impeachment?
No,
Okay.
I think that.
And those would have been the same jail
the
calls that were listed under Sprinkle also.
Well, yes, I was going to say, yes. And the one in particular that I'm thinking about as I play it in my mind, whether it would be this particular one on January the 10th would be considered impeachment. It was right after the murder of Donovan Thomas, and it involved Mr. Bradford, a call from Mr. Arnold to Mr. Bradford.
Okay.
So
are you introducing it through Zachary or through Sprinkle?
it's a call that the state may tender on its own. I think it's one that the conversation needs to be heard. I think it's something that can't be captured in a
Okay.
examination and a response.
All right. So is that one that we need to litigate anything about? Yes. The defense thinks so, so I guess we need
Okay.
to litigate it. There doesn't sound like there's agreement. Okay, is that something we can do now?
I just, if I could hear the specific objection so that I could respond appropriately.
Play the call.
Mr. Whomever said that is correct. It is a 15-minute call, but
Okay.
I believe
I'd ask the court just to allow us to know specifically the objection to it since the call has been identified.
Okay,
if I'm thinking of the right call, there's different people. Mr. Arnold is in custody, by the way, Your Honor. He's arrested on or about the 6th day of January 2015 outside of Club Crucial. You heard about this fight at Mr. Copeland. He's arrested outside, and I believe he's charged with either a small amount of marijuana or a gun or something to that effect.
okay.
It's now the 10th day of January 2015. It's approximately, my memory is 7:42. I may be wrong. And it's clearly a collect call. If the voices are identified the way the state says, it's Mr. Bradford at first and Mr. Arnold. But then there's another woman who's on the phone, who I am not going to stipulate who it is. And she gets on the phone and supposedly says something potentially about Mr. Williams. I am objecting to that portion if that person's not testifying. The person I believe it is, but I'm not stipulating, is Miss Morton. And I heard today that the state said that they will wait on the Honorable Douglas Weinstein to call Miss Morton to promote the alibi defense for Mr. Kendrick. So I would move to exclude that portion. There's other portions, and I just have to get my notes, Your Honor, but I can do that, that are not relevant. They're talking about, I don't know, the jail food, or I don't know. I don't want to make specifics,
Sure.
but it's nothing to do with anything happening in our case.
Okay.
So understanding, at least I'll respond not to the jail food, but because that was at most a few words, but this is, we believe, calls between co-conspirators who are Mr. Arnold reaching out at first. I believe he may have initially had one purpose for reaching out, but the conversation turned to an alert or an informing of the current status of something that had just occurred. We believe that the thing that had just occurred that is a part of the larger conspiracy that is count one is the murder of Donovan Thomas. This is Mr. Arnold reaching out to Mr. Bradford, Mr. Arnold asking, you know, what's up, how things are, how are y'all doing, and Mr. Bradford saying some shit just occurred. He's, we believe, being intentionally selective with his words, and Mr. Arnold is asking where other people are. Miss Morton gets on the phone. Mr. Arnold specifically asked where Mr. Williams is. Ms. Morton says to Mr. Arnold, "Hey, Goldilocks." Mr. Arnold at some point had his hair dyed blonde gold, but she references him. And at some point, of course, Mr. Arnold asks, just to speak to the idea of we don't know who it is, Mr. Arnold asks Mr. Bradford, "Who is that?" And Mr. Bradford, I think, says Bushi. And as they are apprising one another of what is happening outside the jail, as they're apprising Mr. Arnold of what's happening outside the jail, we believe that this whole conversation is a conversation between co-conspirators serving to inform each other of the current status of the conspiracy, which therefore furthers the conspiracy itself. It serves to maintain a certain level of cohesiveness among them, and each one of the people who are taking part in the conversation are persons, we believe, who have just had some involvement, if they did not switch cars with, provide transportation for the people we believe are involved in the murder of Donovan Thomas. They are advising each other of where the participants in that activity are at the moment that the inquiry is made. And I think I said that Mr. Arnold asked for Mr. Williams. It may have been that he asked for Mr. Kendrick. So that's a mistake on my part. He asked where Yak was. And I think that they, in responding where one of them was, Mr. Arnold was told that they were either with Mr. Williams. There was a reference to their current locations. And at this point, the entirety of the conversation, we believe, is one that is informative, one that falls squarely under the co-conspirator statement category. So at the very least, there is that. We do intend to inquire of Mr. Arnold about that. I don't know what he's gonna say.
Okay.
But
Mason,
so it has
Mason Martin.
We believe that it would be introduced in one of two ways.
So if Miss Morton is the person who answers the question of where Mr. Kendrick is and says where somebody else is as well, are you contending that she's an unindicted co-conspirator?
Oh, she is. We believe that she is, yes, an unindicted co-conspirator. She is We're not saying that she, participated in the murder of Donovan Thomas, but in as much as
Much as we want to use her statements.
Actions this night and what she does later on, I think the conversations that she has with Mr. Kendrick, we won't be trying to get into what she told the police, but I'll just tell the court, she tries to provide an alibi initially. Is sort of she's lying for Mr. Kendrick later on, when presented or confronted with the surveillance footage. She's kind of coy and, saying, I don't see who is that? I don't see that. So she, yes, is a part of the conspiracy in that sense. She's not indicted. But when we're looking at the broader conspiracy that involves YSL and protecting its members and carrying out its purposes, she is a part of that. She's not indicted.
Associate of YSL.
Yes.
Your Honor, I would ask that this discussion be tabled for another day. Mr. Weinstein is more on has the details of this conversation and this evidence.
Okay, so I am going to need evidence other than, like, what the state's evidence other than this one conversation is.
She
to
sounds coy is
establish
evidence.
that she's an unindicted co-conspirator. I assume, Mr. Steele, that would be your objection?
I have a series of objections under 24-801D2E, and specifically, and a good case I think is Stafford, STAFFORD versus State, 312, Georgia, 811. It's in Division 5A, as in Elisa, 865 Southeast 2D, 116, 2021. And Your Honor, my position is going to be just the law, like you've been articulating. The state first has a requirement by a preponderance of the evidence that a conspiracy existed, and which is what I focused on and what the court just focused on, that this honorable court focused on, that the conspiracy included the declarant and the defendant against whom the statement is offered. And the statement was made during the course and in furtherance of the conspiracy. And when you hear the recording, you may make determinations that one, if it is Miss Morton, if someone can identify her voice, that she is not a part of the conspiracy, and that would break the chain. And two, it may be a, quote, spilling of the beans, because the entire conversation is nothing to further the conspiracy. If anything, and I'm not saying there's any conspiracy, but if anything, it's very vague and something happened. And I'm not saying that personally, I'm going to argue that it does not further conspiracy. So there's many different objections that I will have.
All right, so that is something we need to come back to.
Yes, Your Honor.
And so far, I apologize.
Go ahead.
So far, to my memory, and please correct me, someone, I don't believe there's any testimony about Miss Morton in this entirety of the case. That's my belief. And the state just said that they potentially, I know they could change their mind, but potentially not going to even call her.
I'm not certain what when Mr. Steele says there's no testimony about Miss Morton. I'm not sure if he means there's not any that's been presented, or he hasn't seen where any could be presented in discovery, because
I think that any has been. Yeah, he's nodding his head in affirmation. Okay, well, I mean, as long as it will be.
yes, and I know that we've already shown the surveillance footage at the gas station. This is just in terms of the idea of Miss Morton. She's the person
Is
getting
it
out
Miss
of Ariel
Morton?
X's car, getting into the Pontiac Bonneville that Javoris Bradford is driving initially, that then Diamante Kendrick gets out of, and walks to another car and comes back and ultimately gets into the driver's side of.
This is.
How does it make her a
the video
co-conspirator?
From the gas station that's the night of?
Yes.
Okay. And
Miss
it's
Moore.
allegedly like immediately after?
Oh, it is. It's immediately
Okay.
before. It's about
Immediately
6
before.
minutes before Donovan Thomas is
Okay.
gunned down 100 yards away.
Okay. And she is identifiable?
Oh, she's identifiable, identified.
All right, well, that sounds like that might do it, but we'll circle back on a day when Mr. Weinstein is here at Mr. Howell's request. And I assume there's gonna be somebody that says, that's able to testify that her kind of street name's Bushi?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So that is that jail call. And then what about Mr. Arnold's plea agreement? Is there a similar kind of factual acknowledgements as there was with Mr. Sledge?
I feel like this is like the third or fourth time she has tried to get somebody to discuss Arnold's plea deal to see why there might be potential issues with how the state is going to direct on the plea deal. And love is not being forthcoming.
There is with each defendant that pled guilty. And also, as I was over the time that the court broke from when the jury was here, I was going through my emails to try and do finish up the collection of correspondence at the time that I was speaking with Mr. Merchant, his attorney, to tell her he's coming up.
Okay.
And I found that same series of emails that I'll be sending to the court
Okay.
and to counsel for the defense regarding her requested changes,
Okay, well,
or he is, or however.
I'm gonna hope that we don't end up calling another attorney to the
I don't-
stand.
Judge,
Stu, please call Ashley
I didn't wanna
Merchant.
call
Please
the
do
first
it.
one.
I didn't really get
Yeah,
that
you
well
did.
for you ultimately, I don't
I-
think.
well, we'll see. We'll see.
Okay. All right, so in the event that the same or a similar thing ends up happening, I guess I'm gonna circle back, when we were talking about the admissibility of the factual acknowledgements plea agreement before, and I ruled that it was admitted, and Mr. Sharp said, okay, well, that may be, but there still may be some continuing witness issues. And I said, well, we'll deal with that later. I was thinking about that yesterday. And I also think that there are continuing witness issues with that.
I don't disagree with the continuing
Okay,
witness
so,
part.
basically that never got displayed to the jury because we only admitted it after the jury was gone and the witnesses were both off the stand. So really, that's not anything they'll ever see.
Actually, Judge, I tendered it I think I tendered it in front of the jury. And at the time, there was an objection.
Right.
And I believe that to the extent that the court admitted it, it can be published. It can go back.
Okay, well, I don't know who you would, I guess you don't necessarily need a witness to do that, but.
And since the court did bring that issue up, there was another matter regarding the factual acknowledgments that I wanted to bring to the court's attention.
Okay.
There was the testimony from the attorney regarding two portions of the final document specifically as the only two portions that were taken issue with.
Right.
One being number 3, which the court remembers,
Mhm.
but number 8
Right.
specifically.
Mhm.
And of course, the argument will be made. There are certain arguments that are right for that, but the thing about number 8 that I wanted to bring to the court's attention is that number 8, and this is not something I felt was I didn't feel it was something to go back and forth with the witness on the stand about. He testified, his memory was, he didn't remember seeing it.
Right.
But number 8 was a distillation, a pulling apart of a iteration, the one right before it, that he took issue with. And the reason the state tendered states 460 Yankee as well as 452 and 453 is that 452 contained the statement that 460 Yankee addressed, and in 460 Yankee, in as much as there were certain things that were not contested but clarified, but the personal knowledge part is a specific thing that wasn't denied, but that was implied. And I'm just saying that instead of having what the state did, what I know we did, and when Mr. Wright says he doesn't remember, that's fine. But when we provided to him the document that had it pulled out, there was not, I don't know how he says he didn't see it, but there was not any indication from anyone that was incorrect. That wasn't just taken out of the air. That
No,
was,
I know that it wasn't, but we have already talked about that. I know what the state, I know and understand how it is that the state got to and believed that, given the comments he made, you all could say, well, okay, still, whether he knew it was planned or not, he still knew it happened and that they were responsible. But it doesn't actually say that in the iteration that got changed. And so that might have been the state's understanding of it. But, I mean, it is what it is. And you didn't explore that with the witness anyway. So, I mean, at this point.
I mean, obviously that was a protracted examination that I did not want to make more protracted, but I do think that in as much as there is an attempt to convince the jury that essentially these are made up things that the
That
state
you just
put.
slipped it in.
Yes.
Well, I mean, Miss Love, then put somebody else on the stand. But I mean, you telling me this, I mean, it doesn't do any, I mean.
The reason that I was telling the court that was not to try and
Just stop, keep trying.
completely
Stop.
relitigate an issue, but as to the section that dealt with his response, not the whole response, not that it's 460, but I would ask if the court might consider reconsidering just us putting in that one part that he responded to, the way that he responded, and then the ultimate version, so that at least before the jury is where that came from, since there has been this continued effort to convince them that we make stuff up and we just, out of thin air.
Well, I mean, you're the one that decided to put him on the stand.
I don't regret that, or I don't think that that's the problem that maybe, obviously minds can disagree. I don't think that that's the problem.
Okay, well, if it were as clear as somewhere in the earlier version was the statement, I personally know that members of YSL were responsible for this murder, or whatever it said in the ultimate version. If that were in the prior version, that would be one thing, but that's not in the prior version. So I have thought that issue through.
Yes, Your
And
Honor.
I understood that to be your argument yesterday or
Okay.
the day before or whenever it occurred.
It was
The day
yesterday and
before
it was
and yesterday,
denied.
and I just,
Yes, Your Honor.
okay.
Wow. She really tried it.
Yet another try there. And I'm being facetious.
Why is she
I
laughing?
know you are.
Okay,